Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. Now, I try not to get overly personal on this channel because I know that has limited appeal, watching someone else belabor or bemoan their issues. But I think that for some of those issues, offering a personal touch helps everybody relate to it a little bit better. And when we're talking about something like going through high school, it's hard not to make it personal. Now, I apologize in advance to those who still have nightmares about their high school years, and I also apologize to those currently in high school who dread going every morning. I'm not trying to pour salt on an open wound here. My goal here is to offer some perspective and maybe even a little advice on the overall high school experience. Because for many teenagers and grown adults, high school was a defining part of their lives, especially for those who went in 2020 during the pandemic. Whatever the circumstances, it marks that key transition from being a kid to being an adult. Suddenly, you can't expect the world to hold your hand and guide you through the harsh realities of life. You're expected to start carrying yourself with more maturity and understanding. And on top of all that, you have to endure the hormonal time bomb that is puberty, which brings with it many other physical and mental challenges, but I'll try not to focus on that too much. I'll save it for another video. But whatever your situation or struggle, it's still overwhelming. High school just throws so many things at you over the course of several years. You're still so young, but you're still expected to chart your entire life somehow. You get so many mixed messages, and you don't always know which are worth taking seriously. And unfortunately, you usually don't find out until much later in life how wrong or misguided some of those things were. This is where I'd like to share some parts of my experience because for me, high school was one of the worst periods in my life. To date, I have never enjoyed more problems, frustrations, and overall misery than I did when I was in high school. We've all heard about people who peaked in high school, but for me, I was on the opposite end of that spectrum. Now, there are many reasons for that, but most of them, in hindsight, were my own goddamn fault. I won't deny there were some external factors that I couldn't control, but the specifics of those factors aren't important. What mattered ultimately was how I reacted and adjusted to them. And for the most part, I did not adjust very well. I was already a bit of a mess when I started high school. I was incredibly uptight, socially awkward, and had very poor self-esteem. So, needless to say, I didn't make a lot of friends, nor did I attract a lot of people. The friends I did make just had to be extra patient with me. But I didn't make it easy for them. I often carried myself with this singular attitude that I was a loser until proven otherwise. The only way to change that was to ace every class, to get perfect scores every time, and never make a mistake. Trust me, it's even unhealthier than it sounds. It also didn't help that I had a bad acne problem and poor health habits. And naturally, having such a negative mindset led to some pretty negative behaviors. I didn't work on myself nearly as much as I should have, especially in terms of social skills and overall physical health. Even today, it still feels like I'm catching up. But as bad as my attitude was, the overall high school experience just seemed to intensify all my personal problems. I knew plenty of others who enjoyed a similar experience, and this is where I hope my perspective can relate to others, especially for those who are still in high school. Because, at least here in America, the whole concept just feels incredibly flawed on the surface of it. When I look back on it, going to elementary school had a very different feel to it. You went there to learn, make friends, and get some general guidance when it came to growing up. And that had its own set of challenges, but it never felt so overwhelming. Then you go to high school, and suddenly it feels so different. To me, it felt more like going to a prison for 7 hours a day. We're bussed in, we're given a schedule, and we're expected to abide by that schedule. We're even punished if we dare deviate. You also get this sense that the adults in the building see you as either a statistic, a problem, or a potential deviant. That might have just been my experience and my own personal misery, but I still felt so utterly trapped in high school. I wasn't there because I wanted to be. I was there because I had to be, plain and simple. I know it's the law, but that didn't make it any less arduous. I know some of that applies to all levels of public school, but with high school, I really did feel it. And even as a teenager, I understood it to some extent. I mean, we're teenagers. We're a bunch of immature, hormonal proto-adults. You can't assume our judgment is going to be that refined. But at times, I felt as though the adults treated every teenager as a juvenile delinquent in waiting. We never got the benefit of the doubt. We were all just a bunch of authority-hating punks until proven otherwise. It was insulting, degrading, and demeaning on so many levels. I even think it made some more inclined to act out just to spite the administrators. But even that wasn't the worst part. Because as bad as my attitude and the environment was, it still could have balanced out had going to high school actually resulted in significant gains in knowledge. But for me, it really didn't. Yes, I still took a full load of classes. Yes, I still passed those classes. I even made the honor roll almost every semester. But did I ultimately learn much from those classes? If I'm being honest, I really didn't. The only skill that ever seemed to matter was passing the test. That was it. That was the end-all be-all of all the lectures, projects, assignments, and homework. You do all that just so you can pass a bunch of goddamn tests. It doesn't matter if you know the who, what, where, when, why, or how of the material. It only matters that you pass that test. That is not an effective way to learn a concept. I challenge anyone to prove otherwise. If you're in high school right now, chances are you already know this. Learning facts, dates, and formulas can be useful, but only in relation to a relevant challenge. And a Scantron test or a bunch of fill-in-the-blanks just isn't that much of a challenge. All it does is test your ability to remember things and fill in blanks or bubbles. Me being as uptight as I was as a teenager, I agonized over every test. I wasn't very good at memorizing things that weren't related to superhero comics or football stats, and I remember many sleepless nights and stressful mornings lamenting over upcoming tests. There were many days in which I would even read my textbooks while at the breakfast table. Hell, I was more stressed out than my parents most mornings, and they had full-time jobs. And as soon as those tests were over, I mostly forgot the material. And unless I was already interested in it, I just couldn't forget it fast enough. Now, compared to college, which had fewer tests and a lot more essays, projects, etc., I'd say I've forgotten a good 90% of what I studied in high school. That still upsets me to this day because while I was stressing over all these tests, I had teachers and counselors constantly telling me that this shit was critical. They gave the impression that how I performed in high school would go on to define my life. If I didn't get good grades, make the honor roll, and work my ass off every day, then no college would accept me, I'll never get a good job, and I'll die poor and lonely. They might not have used those exact words, but that was the impression I got in my overwhelmed teenage mind. Any screw-up in high school would ultimately screw up your entire life. Now, I don't deny that some screw-ups in your youth can have lasting consequences, but most of them don't. Life in general just doesn't work that way. Little mistakes rarely define you. It's whether or not you learn from them that actually matters. And I had to unlearn that as soon as I left high school. It just took way longer than it should have. And because of those issues I had, I really neglected my subpar social skills. That, more than anything, is what I wish I could have changed about my high school experience. I really could have benefited from just having more friends overall. And I had opportunities too, because in general, I got along with everyone. I never made any enemies or got into any fights. I just didn't have a good social life because I was not a pleasant person to be around. I was just so negative and self-deprecating all the time, and I don't blame anyone for keeping me at arm's length. Those who thrive in high school, relatively speaking, took advantage of the opportunities beyond the tests. They developed and refined those social skills to make friends and forge new connections. They may not have gotten the best grades, but those skills definitely carried them further later on in life. Whether it's in a career or finding a romantic partner, social skills are a powerful tool, and I don't think high school does enough to encourage them. They certainly didn't do enough for me. If anything, the regimented nature of high school discourages those skills. You're encouraged to obey the rules, respect authority, and follow a certain path that teachers and counselors have laid out for you. The only reason you develop social skills is just because you're crammed into the same building as so many people your own age. It's more a side effect than a goal. And if you already have those social skills, then you're in good shape. But if you don't, you're at a huge disadvantage. And I just never overcame that disadvantage. Not until long after I graduated. Now, there's a lot more I could say about my high school years, but I hope I've gotten my point across. It was bad, it was miserable, it was depressing. But there were a few bright spots. There were a handful of talented, wonderful teachers who helped make my high school experience feel slightly less terrible. But they were the exception, not the norm. And in the years since I graduated, my perspective on high school has evolved a great deal. I also try to share that perspective with those entering or enduring high school. If I could offer a few tidbits of advice, it would be this. 1. High school will not define your entire life, no matter how good or bad it is. It's not the end, it's barely the beginning. 2. The connections you make in high school may be fleeting, but your ability to make those connections will serve you well for years to come. 3. Don't decide on a career before you know what you're passionate about. You're a teenager. Your experiences are limited. For a lot of people, it takes a while to find your passion, but it's worth the wait. 4. Learn to think critically. Passing a test will only take you so far. Thinking critically will help you in so many ways down the line. 5. Learning from mistakes is often the most effective kind of learning. It's also one of the best sources of personal growth. 6. Going through puberty sucks, but you're stronger for enduring it. If you're in high school right now and you just stumbled across this video, I genuinely hope it makes a difference. It may not seem like it now, but there is a life after high school. And if you take a healthy approach, it's a life worth pursuing. It's a life worth looking forward to. You don't have to define yourself on your ability to pass a test, a class, or a project while you're a teenager. Most of your life is still way ahead of you. So enjoy your youth. Dare to dream. Find out what interests you and learn as much about it as you can. Most importantly, keep striving to be better. High school may help or hinder that effort, but it's ultimately up to you how you go about it. But please, don't be as miserable as I was. You deserve better. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Take care and stay safe.